This is a third installment of a series of videos which, if I were to plan a series on it, I would call Walking with a Hermit in 2019. But I didn't plan a series on it, and this is kind of a series of videos, but it is a third installment basically. And the other two, I think two or three, I think it's two videos. I will put a link up here in the eye in the sky. You can click that and you'll see some cards which are links to those videos if you so choose to go there at any given time during this video or at the end of this video. I will link them as well so that I don't have to repeat myself and manage the length of this video. So the moon and the hermit. Before it was the hermit and death, the hermit and the devil, which also called the lord of the gates of matter. My approach to tarot is a bit of a hodgepodge. I pick from wherever, whichever, and I synthesize them. I don't even want to call my approach psychological anymore. I don't know what it is at the moment. It is a continuing process, but the last time I talked about tarot, I did say that the ultimate tarot is not the tarot, and so I will not be showing any tarot cards at the moment. My approach is definitely not esoteric, perhaps more exoteric. I'm not even sure if it's exoteric. I laid claim to psychological tarot before, and now I'm not even sure if it's psychological. It's perhaps more poetic, which is why Enrique Enriquez is a great inspiration of mine, even though I am not a follower of his method. But I would like to quote you before I begin. He recently posted an announcement in October, I believe. He said, teaching the tarot is a clear transaction. I put a stone in your pocket, and when you put your hand there, you find a stone. Teaching the language of birds is different. I pretend to put a stone in your pocket, and when you put your hand there, you find a stone. Now, I'm not quite sure if I can draw a direct parallel between what he said there in announcing the retirement of his course about the pips. But I started off this journey trying to find something through tarot, and I ended up the other end about 4 to 5 years later, finding a completely different thing. My my stance on tarot for myself at the moment is very different from when I started. I started out exploring it as a way of understanding divination more. I came from a tradition, a culture where divination is daily practice. It's not, it's not something that is outside of the mainstream. But I do not practice the art of divination. That is, people don't consult to me. I consult I consult with people, others who help me. Because to be a practitioner of divination, it's a lifelong calling. Sometimes it involves ancestral lineage. Not that you have to, but what I'm saying is that it's like being a priest. It is a serious commitment, and most people just can't commit to that, that larger calling. But now I arrive at the other end after laying firm claim to psychological tarot, not quite knowing what kind of tarot that I have discovered. It's not even psychological. It's not even exoteric. It's maybe poetic, maybe experiential. I don't know what it's called. When I figure this out, I'll let you know. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. This is like my third try because I kept coughing in my last two tries of filming this. And the art of numerology is what I've used to decide what card to contemplate with this year in 2019. My knowledge of numerology is very basic. I do not know if I take it in a way that most people who practice the art of numerology take it as a metaphysical sort of cosmic, larger universe type of belief. I think I'm just using it as a way of picking a card rather than randomly. I wanted something systematic, and I can't think of anything else. And the idea of pulling the trump or the major arcana for the year is firmly embedded in calculating your date of birth and the numbers on the trumps as assigned by various esoteric schools and traditions. Anyway, so that was just an easy starting point for me. I was married to a family of South Asian heritage, which take the art of numerology very seriously. And so I highly respect the art, but I personally, at the moment anyway, at least for the purposes of this contemplation and this exercise, use it simply as a method available to me to pull a card, to choose a card. And so the hermit in the past my last two videos have spoken about the hermit in relation to death and the devil, or in the Golden Dawn tradition called the Lord of the Gates of Matter. And I will not repeat myself, and I will refer to you to two previous videos. I will link it up here in the eye in the sky or at the end of this video. And again, the ultimate tarot is not a tarot, and I'm in the process of walking that talk. And so I will not be showing you any cards or images, but please feel free to pick any images of a hermit, of the moon, of the devil, of death from various media that you can grab a hold of. Books, storybooks, comic books, posters, magazines, the internet, your own art, photography, anything. So I have very high astigmatism, and when I go out in the dark, I can't distinguish between depth of field and shadows. And because of that, I often find it really difficult to navigate myself physically in the dark, even under moonlit sky and even under lights, unless it's really, really bright. And so let's focus on the moonlit night for the moment. I remember growing up experiencing moonlit nights as a very ethereal, otherworldly, very clear picture of the world, but through a different lens. And so when people often talk about the moon as illusion in tarot, when I first started exploring tarot 5 years ago, I found it really, I couldn't just accept it. I wanted to understand where this idea of illusion come from. In another cartomancy tradition called the Lenormand, the moon is a representation of poetry, of dream, of inspiration, aspiration, very much like the stars. And if you think about it archetypically, stars are often in various cultures seen as a promise, as a guide, as a sign, this sparkle of light in the dark pitch sky. The moon, on the other hand, seems to be a mix representation from lighting your way in a way that stars cannot, and at night, to the sense of, you know, this werewolf, this transformation, this bringing up the more primal side of people and all that. So I understand that. I understand that. But for me personally, the moon is more like walking in the dark when I can't see, because I have this high astigmatism. I cannot distinguish shadows from depth. And what I do usually is close my eyes and I use the tip of my feet and the tip of my fingers to feel my way around, because I am less likely to trip over that way. And so in that sense, I understand that it's an illusion. But how does it relate to the hermit for me? If I think of the hermit emerging from the depth of the underworld, crossing the threshold of death back and forth, the death and life, and the tradition of the hermit that I grew up with, which I've also discussed quite in great details in one of my videos. Again, feel free to refer to that. There is a sense of relying less on the presumption or we take for granted what we see with our eyes. And those feeling around the dark at night under moonlit sky and the story of the hermit emerging from the underworld remind me that sometimes the best way to see is to close your eyes. And I think Andicats talk about that a lot, about really seeing. To truly see is to close your eyes and you truly see. I can't directly quote him. I think he said something along that line. It might be on a private conversation. I can't remember. But the hermit and the moon is related in that the hermit internalizing that vision, from moving from seeing with the eyes to seeing with other faculties, will not or cannot happen without the facilitation of an environment that is made available by the moon. There is the moon, there is a star, and there is a sun in the tarot, the traditional tarot that most of us know as the 78 cards in 2019, in this day and age, in the 21st century. If you go back in history, there are other heavenly bodies, which I have spoken, I can't remember if I've taken that video down, going through the Mantegna Tarot, for example, which isn't by Mantegna and it's not really a tarot. It's 50 cards of just trumps. And I'm one of those people who believe that the 78 cards in the modern tarot is a combination of two decks. The pips, which is related to our modern playing cards, and the trumps, which is related to the likes of the game of time, which I've made a video as well about. I will try to link it again up there or at the end of this video. Otherwise, feel free to do a search under historical history and facsimile playlist here on this channel. So the Mantegna Tarot, the Game of Time, the Game of Trumps is one game, and then the Minors is from another deck of another game altogether that became merged somewhere along history of playing cards. And so the trumps here, I always have that in the background, that the sun, the moon, and the stars weren't the only three heavenly bodies. Once upon a time, there were others. But focusing on the three that we're working with today, the moon is the most mysterious to me because of it's because of its constant association with illusion. And I suppose for me, linking it back to the hermit as a hermit, what the hermit story represent, which is removal of the self from society, removal of the self from the world, so that the self can develop beyond its natural physical assignment, beyond, in a way that the traditional Indonesian hermits that I've mentioned to you, as well as those from India, whose body could perform beyond the natural law of how the body is supposed to perform, not eating for 30 days, for example, or breathing so slow that you don't feel pain or cold or heat, or lifting your arms for 20 years without taking it down ever, so much so that the hand and the arms became deformed, to go beyond the physics, the physicality, the physical capacity assigned to us. In order to do that, in order to be such Shaolin monks, with all of their incredible physical ability, or their ability to surmount physical limitations, have been greatly documented. Perhaps that's the easiest example to, that's the most popular example that I could, because the Indonesian hermits seems to be a concept that I haven't heard other than the Indian yogis. This surmounting the physical ability, your natural ability as human physically. It's not something I greatly, it's not something that is greatly discussed in discussing metaphysical and esoteric ideas in the West. I don't know much about Western esotericism, or I'm not a great student of the metaphysics of the Western tradition, so I really don't know. Maybe I just haven't come across them. But going back to this moon and the hermit, for me personally, this year, 2019, have been a year of lessons from the hermit, death, the devil, and the moon. Is that it is a lesson not so much in illusion, but it is a lesson of perception. Both are lessons in reality, really. It's just that one perhaps giving in too much to, I don't know, I feel like illusion make us a victim, too much a victim of ourselves. I think perception take more charge. Perception, the idea of perception, allow us to take more charge about how we conduct ourselves, about how we make ourselves stronger on the inside, so that we can perceive in a way that is functional, that is productive, that is nurturing, that is powerful, that is self-directive, that is that points towards growth rather than towards the shrinking of the self. And illusion doesn't lay credence to how the moon relates to the hermit. If you are a hermit, if you retreat from society, from the world, to become stronger before you return, like the hermit returning from the underworld, then the moon served only as a training ground to hone your perceptive capacity, to sharpen your sight without necessarily seeing things with your physical eyes, in a way that I try to find my way in the dark when I can't see properly, even with my glasses on, even with the moonlit sky brightly shining my surroundings. I have to close my eyes and use my feet to feel around the ground and my hands to feel around me to make sure I don't trip over. And so that's my contemplation with the moon in relation to the hermit and death and the lord of the gates of matter, materialization of a different kind, materializing the self in a different way so that we can maneuver the moonlit sky, the moonlit night, without tripping over ourselves. So I've just arrived 3 days ago from Singapore. I've just unpacked, and now I have 1 day. I had 3 days to rest. I have 1 day to repack for a couple of weeks trip, and I will say adieu until I'll see you again next year. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah or Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa to those who are celebrating, and I will see you in 2020.